When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's it, everybody. We are back. This is the HTML All the Things podcast. This episode is titled, Should You Go Solo? Transitioning from Developer to Entrepreneur. This is actually a listener-requested episode, and I'll reach out to that listener to let them know that we actually recorded this once we've done so. But yeah, in this episode, we're going to be talking about going away from kind of, I guess, a traditional employer-employee relationship. So you being the employee, working as a developer for an agency or for some sort of other department that requires a developer, web developer, whatever. And you're deciding, okay, I'm going to go, become a freelancer. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to build a business. I'm going to leave this place. How do I transition? So this should be a rather topical episode because I feel like a lot of people are on shaky ground with either maybe they're doing part-time remote work. Maybe they're, doing two jobs right now to make all the ends meet. Maybe they're worried about a layoff coming up. Maybe they have been laid off or you've been laid off if you're listening to this and you're like, what do I do now? Because, that's not great and I need to support myself, maybe a family if you have one. And so hopefully this episode will help you kind of navigate a little bit of this precarious time, I guess I'll call it. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And if you're looking to upgrade your skills, and there's a new thing coming out, actually. So we're talking about Scrimba right now, and they will soon have a full stack developer path. It's currently planned to come out in June, so I'm not sure whenever this episode comes out, but they have an interactive media player code editor. If you don't know what Scrimba is, basically you can learn how to code. The instructor will be giving you instructions on this is how you do this is how you do that, but you can actually pause and interact with what's on the screen. Go in there and say, break the CSS to figure out what's going on, figure it out, be like, okay, now my question has been answered, and then you can press play and the lesson will continue as it goes. You can check us out. You can check that out if you'd like to learn more about web development. Again, they now have back-end courses. They're about to have that full stack pathway. You can get up to 20% off. Scrimba.com/links/HTML all the things is our affiliate link to get up to 20% off. Cannot speak today. Go check that out. Anyway, let's talk about how to transition from an employee to an entrepreneur. So I wanted to preface this conversation, and I want to preface this conversation with something that I've kind of boiled some stuff down to. Because, Mike, I'm sure you're going to have some stuff to say about this, but it really does depend on your situation. Like, if you're living in a place where you have a huge nest egg and it's cheap to live, that's a much different situation than if you have a whole bunch of dependents, like a bunch of kids, or maybe your parents are older and they're dependents of yours, or you have, you're married and your spouse no longer has a job because maybe they were laid off, or maybe your spouse only works part-time, so their income cannot cover all the expenses. Maybe you live in a particularly expensive area. Maybe you're looking to move. There's tons and tons of different scenarios, and that's going to largely affect how your transition works. And so I was kind of racking my brain about this, thinking about it, and I kind of boiled all these situations down into time and money. Now, that sounds like a really robotic way to do so, but we are talking about business here. Time and money. Time is money. So it does make sense. Think about this. So if you have a whole bunch of kids and you're a person that's like, I really want to be like a present parent, I want to be there all the time, things like that, that's going to be a big weight on your time. It's also likely going to be a huge weight on your money, depending on where you live and depending on the lifestyle you're trying to give. The other side of the coin is maybe you're like you're like a bachelor and you're living, just fine, but maybe you're living a little bit beyond your means because you want to be a bit flashy and you want to have like a bit more luxury in your life because you don't have any dependents relying on you as well. But maybe you're a bachelor and you're already living frugal and you're constantly like investing and you're trying to retire early and all this. All of these things can boil down into time and money. And so what you need to really do, and I'll like kind of like pass this to Mike in a second, but what you really need to do, in my opinion, is you need to evaluate your responsibilities, but you also need to evaluate your current situation. Can you, like, do you have an emergency fund? Can you live without a job for a while? Can you actually invest money into something like a business that you start? Because a business is not going to be free. Do you have supplemental income? Are you going to be able to grab maybe weekend work? Look at all those specific things. Look at all the time that you have and figure out, okay, I gotta parent my kids here. I gotta help my, elderly parents here. I gotta help my grandparents here, things like that. Or, hey, I live in a really expensive area. The taxes are crazy. The rent is really crazy. So I have this constant expensive lifestyle cost. And even if you're being frugal, maybe the area you're in is still very much expensive. So now your money is going to be in trouble. And so you really need to look at sort of your ratio, your amount of, and really figure out your time and money situation. Because if you have no time and you have no money, then unfortunately transitioning is going to be very, very difficult.
There's a little bit of another side to this. So what Matt said was 100% correct, and it's something you should 100% consider, and something that I personally consider every day. Like, it is very logical and makes a lot of sense, right? Like, make sure that you're putting yourself in a situation that doesn't sink you, essentially. The reality is a little bit different. If you look at the success stories from entrepreneurs, a lot of them start with something like, I was in dire straits and I started this company because I really had a big passion for it. And a lot of them are like, I succeeded despite the odds, right? That's the reality of a lot of these entrepreneurial stories. Like, they jump in both feet, they have a huge passion for what they're doing, and they have nothing to fall back on. That's the entrepreneur journey that I've read a million times. Now, there's obviously a lot of people that have good fallbacks and have thought this through a lot and have jumped into it. Not to say like there's definitely, both sides to this. But in entrepreneurship, the reality is a lot of people just like do it, and you either succeed or you really hard fail, right? So it's really difficult to say that, hey, only do this if you have everything lined up. Because I feel like if I say that, no one is going to be an entrepreneur. Like, no one is going to be an entrepreneur, because there's always going to be an excuse. Like, oh, I just need a couple more thousand in my emergency fund. I just need I need to do this, like, this one extra month to make sure that X, Y, and Z. The reality is, if you think like that, I don't want to be too harsh, but I think that that's almost like a failure mentality, unfortunately.
Well, I think what you're saying, Mike, is actually, I guess, parallel to, or at least it brought up in my mind, the question of, how, like, if you, like, some people will say, like, I want to start a business. So someone in their family has started a business before, and that person's sort of like a very, like, serious entrepreneur. They've been an entrepreneur for a while. And I've seen situations or heard about situations where that person is extremely harsh. The person who is already an entrepreneur is extremely harsh to the other person and tries to talk them out of it. And the lesson there is, if you are able to be talked out of it, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. And that's exactly why I brought up, really boil down your time and money, because you're 100% right, Mike. Like, you're never going to have the perfect amount of time and the perfect amount of money. And also burning the bridge once you get there, like you're like, I'm doing this, and you burn the bridge so you can't retreat, and now you must move forward, is another tactic that some people will use. However, there are, like, realities in life where you boil down your time and money, and if it's like, well, like, just something blatant, our family rules, like, our family policy is that I every waking moment I have to be with the kids because my wife is working. Well, then that's it. Like, because if you literally have no time, there's no way to negotiate your way out of it, then that's it. So now you're not talking yourself out of it. Your situation has talked yourself out of it. So if you boil down your time and money, like, if you're like, I refuse to have any hit to my lifestyle, but I also have no savings, and I'm going to start a business that's going to rival Mark Zuckerberg's tomorrow. That's not going to, that's not going to work. However, there is a lot to be said about asking yourself, why do you want to do this? If you do have a strong desire where you're like, I'm really frustrated with my job, or you're really ambitious and you're like, I really want to make this chat app or this web app or whatever it is, or you really want to have your own kind of freedom and say, I want to work the hours I want to work. And that's not an excuse to say you can just work 2 hours a day or something. But if you want to have the freedom to say, I'm going to work, tonight because during the day I had a bank meeting or something like that, or I'm going to work in the morning and in the evening, and I'm going to have the middle of my day free, things like that. Having like a good ambition, having a good like reason or an answer to the question, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to start a business? Is almost as important, if not as important, as boiling it down and analyzing that time and money sort of, I guess, world realities that we face.
Yeah. And I think like you need to do this. Like you need to sit down and figure out the time and money situation. I think it's absolutely paramount. Like you have to do this. You have to talk to your partner. If you're alone, you have to talk to yourself, I guess, in that reality, like Matt's saying. And like, if you can come up with reasons against it that outweigh everything, don't do it. And like, I really mean that. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. Like a job is actually a really good thing for a lot of reasons. Like entrepreneurship has its benefits, but it has so many negatives that aren't really talked about as much. Right. So like that balance, you really need to be freaking in it. Like you need to want to really do it. I think another thing that I do want to talk to, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, is how to like get into it without diving both feet in. Right. Like I think that is a valuable aspect in this, is like you can try it out, but we're going to talk about that really, really soon in one of the sections. But like, yeah,
we can just dive right in if you want. Like why not? Like, because this is a good time to like almost transition to that, is because if you have a good question, so like, okay, so let's say at this point we've kind of just decided there's three things that you should have. You should have, let's just say a reasonable amount of time, a reasonable amount of money, and those are very variable for people. And then you should have a good reason as to why you want to do this. And again, these are all variable to different people. Like some people might be like, some people might want the freedom, some people, all different, there's different reasons, different amounts of money, different amounts of time. So we've established that, but you need to analyze these three things for yourself. And then once you decide this, you might say, you know what? I think I'm going to need 8 hours a day to build this business. However, I could build it as a side hustle, and I could do it in 4 hours a day, and I have the 4 hours a day. So that's like a prime thing, like you were kind of mentioning, Mike, where there's different options to transition. Like you could kind of go cold turkey, I'm going to quit my job, start a business, but you could just say, I'm going to side hustle this. It allows you to like check it out, see if it's okay. And I know that some business people are like, that's stupid. You should always jump 2 feet, jump with 2 feet, do this and that. I agree and I disagree. Mostly because there's different people. Some people, let's just say and this is like a personal thing for each individual. Some people are going to be so anxious with no salary that's coming in that their business is gonna not do well, because they're going to be so anxious all the time, and they're going to be so worried about every single dollar, even if they've saved up a nest egg and they've boiled down their time and money. They're going to be so worried all the time that it's like, hey man, maybe a side hustle route is more your speed. You can make an extra $1,000 on the side or something like that. And then once you've really kind of figured out how to make that extra 1,000, maybe that's a lot in your area. And you're like, you know what? I'm only making 2,000 at my job. I'm already making 50%. I can just quit my job real quick. The 50% is not the 50%, which is the $1,000 is not enough, but I only have to make another 1,000 to make what my job was making before. So you're going to feel a lot better about that. And you're going to, and with the side hustle route, generally speaking, a side hustle is just that, a side hustle. So you're able to build it on the side, and you're not threatening your stability of like a salary or something.
You needed to prove your concept. I think it's a really good approach if you want to like, okay, I need to prove that there is an audience here and that there is a way to make money here, right? Like whatever that proof is for you, like I want to generate $2,000 a month, whatever goals you set. And then once you have that proof, it's much easier for you to make that jump. It's just, and it's much more logical too. Like, yes, everyone will say you have to jump 2 feet first. If you watch Shark's Tank or whatever, they're like always grilling people for having like, it as a side hustle. They'll never invest in you. But that's okay, because a lot of those people on Shark Tank come in having had it already as a side hustle, prove the concept, and jumped in after that. And that's the reality that I think it's the realistic reality nowadays, especially talking to software engineers and software developers that have an idea on the side, because you're not having to create a whole product from a mechanical sense. You don't have to usually rent an office or anything like that. You don't have to hire a big staff. Like, a lot of your proof of concepts can be, hey, I'm going to create this little code base. I'm going to market, and I'm going to learn if I can market. And that's another really, really big, important skill that, like, if you don't like talking to people, this is not for you, right? Like, you need to figure all that stuff out, right? And then you have enough information there to be like, okay, I can start taking the steps to maybe go part-time, which is another way to actually, transition slowly without as much risk. Is like, you can always go to your job and be like, hey, I can't work full-time anymore because of X, Y, and Z. Is there any way I can do part-time? If you're in a good place to lose that job as well, right? Like, because, if you say that, there's a chance that they can be like, oh, you're not in it fully, so we're going to cut you. So there is a little bit of a risk there. But if you're going to quit anyway, maybe it's a good idea to ask at least first part-time. And then that is another way for you to slowly transition out without as much risk. And so, like, there's just so many steps you can take to transition from developer to entrepreneur specifically nowadays that I think you're right. Like, Matt, I initially my thought was like, you have to dive for 2 feet in. I don't think that is the right move at all, especially in today's market. If you have a job, that's another big if, right? Like, maybe some people listening to this don't even have jobs. This isn't really for you directly, but like, if you do ever get into a job position, really a good way to do it is on the side.
We do like kind of exist in a weird, not a weird, but like a unique way too, where like a whole business can just be built from a laptop. Because some people, if they're trying to become like a carpenter or something, they're going to need a shop, and there's a physical presence, and they may have to deliver things and go to houses and things like that. Whereas with programmers, developers, other digital jobs, digital centric jobs, we're literally able to one day suddenly be like, I'm going to start building out this app. And you can literally just take an afternoon that you have off and start building out an app. And that's it, right? There's no real materials that you're gathering. Obviously, I'm simplifying things to an extent because you need hosting and things along those lines, and other like things that you need, like maybe you need some graphic design done, or, other things like that. But at the end of the day, you're able to largely start and finish like full businesses just from a laptop, just from a desktop these days. And you could work with somebody that's like across the pond. Like, if you're in Europe, you could work with someone from the United States. If you're in the United States, you could work with someone from Australia, like whatever. It's kind of a tangled web of the internet, but you're able to do that. And again, you're not traveling to those places. You're not traveling to Australia, to America, to Europe, to wherever. You're doing all this from a laptop, and maybe not even on your own internet connection. Like, if you're a person that's like, don't have internet or something like that at home, you could always do this from like public Wi-Fi if your area offers it at, say, cafes and things like that. So when we work these like digital centric jobs, they do really lend themselves to the side hustle route where you kind of dip your toe in. And here's the thing is, I'll say that even though we can do the side hustle route and it's good for a lot of people, I do think that there is something to be said about the sort of burn the ships method, which is you're quitting cold turkey. This is a high risk method where you're like, I know my own brain. I know that if I put, one toe into the pond, that I'm just going to leave that pond. I'm never going to go further than that. I'll never finish this app because I'll just keep working at work, and, I'll make excuses like, oh, I'm kind of tired tonight. Like, I won't work on my app tonight, things like that. So there is still reason, even if you can do the side hustle route, some people, and again, this is a very personal experience, but some people are really going to benefit from that cold turkey or that burn the ships method where, okay, that's it. I'm now becoming an entrepreneur. I'm now building this business up, and I want to do this no matter what. And I don't want to go back. And I do want to say something else here too. And it's about the technical skill kind of area. And that is that a lot of people, and Mike, you and I made this mistake as well when we first got started, is the technical skill is a big part of your job, but it is absolutely not all of your job. Like, running a business, even though it's a small thing, even if you're just like a freelancer trying to like pick up the odd contract or things like that, it requires some other types of thinking. You got to think about pricing, which is not easy. You got to think about the market and maybe your positioning in the market, maybe your pricing position. Like, I'm at this skill level, I'm charging this much, but my competitors are charging much less. Now I might have to charge less, for example. You need to navigate the various legal things that are happening in your area, like your business law is what I mean. So are you going to incorporate? Are you a sole proprietorship? Are you this? Are you that? I'm sure it's all different across the world. So you have to take a look at all the sort of business laws and business regulations, and you have to navigate those things. You have to deal with marketing. Like, do I need to market? Am I word of mouth? Am I not? Do I need to have a strong brand, or is the brand just me because I'm a consultant? All those type of things. And another big one, and I honestly am going to say this is the biggest one that affects specifically the day-to-day, is honestly the business admin. Messing with the invoices, chasing down people that haven't paid, making sure you charge the right tax for the right jurisdictions, making sure that contracts are written properly, all kinds of things like that. That stuff sounds super simple, and there's all these tools out there, QuickBooks and FreshBooks and all these tools out there that claim that it makes it easy. It is not easy. It is not easy, even in the slightest. You can actually compare this because a lot of people have experience with things like CRMs and things like that. Like, these tools are great tools once they're set up and working. But the thing is these tools are often open-ended because many places have their own organizational ideas where they want to organize their staff in certain ways, organize their tasks in certain ways, give people certain access to certain things. That's exactly the same thing with things like QuickBooks and stuff, where, QuickBooks doesn't know your local tax law. QuickBooks doesn't know this stuff. It has some suggestions. It has some templates, but what template do you need to use? Like, you need to know that stuff. So do you need to hire people out? And so I think that this type of stuff gets kind of brushed under the rug quite a bit, and that messes with that time and money ratio, where you don't realize, like Mike, like you and I, at year end, we spend like a good 2 weeks, and it's probably like 70 to 75% of our time for those 2 weeks, making sure all our stuff is ready, not to send to the government for filing taxes, to send to a professional who then takes a month to then send to the government. And then we have to deal with the fallout after of like, do we need to pay? Do they pay us? Am I collecting a refund? And this is not an easy thing. And so this is absolutely something that you need to consider. You may be amazing at tech. And I'll hand it off to you, Mike, where like you mentioned that, a job is great. Well, oftentimes you're in a technical job having great technical skills and good people skills. There's some other soft skills, but let's just say like 90%, let's say maybe, should really, like, if you have great technical skills, you're 90% of the way there if you're working in a job, right? 90% of the way there. 10% is maybe soft skills, things like that. And that ratio changes per job, 100%. Thing is, when you're running your own business, that's not the case. Like, I hate business admin, and I do it every week. So you have to be okay with that, and you have to incorporate that into the time and money equation, because also QuickBooks ain't free.
I agree with you for the most part, except for the thing where it's like 90% technical and 10% social for a job. I actually think it's much more leaning towards social there too. I think it's a 60-40 split, like 60% technical and 40% people skills. So it's still, technical is still a really big part of it. But to progress, I should be clear here. I think to stay at a job, maybe you're correct. But to progress in a job, most of that is going to be relying on your people skills. Okay. So that's the job split that I would say, and I agree with. And I think that that's a very relative one. In a business, when you're the business owner and you're the only one working there, in my opinion, it goes down to like 90-10, where 90% of it is people skills and all this other stuff like business admin, marketing, all that stuff. And 10% is technical. If you can jank together whatever idea you have, right, and then sell it, that's going to be exponentially more valuable than a perfectly flawless execution with no selling. Like, as long as you can get something working, even if it's jank, that's enough for you to be able to see if you can do the marketing and the branding, to see if you can sell it, to see if you can do all the other stuff. And that's really, if you're going to make that leap to the business side, you need to be okay with that. And not only okay, you need to be really good at some of those things, right? The admin stuff, I don't know if anyone actually likes the admin stuff. I'm sure accountants and stuff, like they get into accounting for a certain reason. So maybe they do. Fine. Business admin, you just have to tolerate. If you can tolerate it, great. But marketing and branding, being able to like market on social media, being able to like communicate, network, talk to people, you have to be like that's got to be your top level skill. Like you got to be in the top, percentile in that to make a business successful for the most part. And this is where I see most people that we talk to, like, Matt and I have been talking about this business stuff for a really long time now. And we've had people reach out and be like, hey, I'm going to start my own freelancing firm. And we've had like success stories on some of them. And a lot of them, we've had negative, like, the stories of like failure. And a lot of that came down to, I just hated dealing with clients. And if that's your baseline, you're never going to succeed because that's 90% of your job is dealing with clients. The technical stuff, yeah, it's important and you have to be able to produce, but like if you can't communicate to a client that something's going to be delayed or how to properly create something, like that's it. The client's going to dump you. And so I really want to emphasize this part. If you're thinking about going down the route of, hey, I want to make my first business, I want to become a contractor, I want to become a freelancer or something where you're working for yourself, and you absolutely hate dealing with clients, or you hate dealing with marketing, or you hate dealing with like, social outreach. Like you can't imagine yourself picking up the phone and calling someone on the phone to try to sell them something. Like this just might not be for you, right? Like that, it's probably a good indicator that like you either A, have to accept that this might not be for you, or B, maybe find a partner that this stuff is awesome for them. And then you can focus on the technical, they can focus on the social, like, and that works great. That's why a lot of technical founders have co-founders that are in marketing or like been more business oriented because of this situation where it's really difficult to have both in a person. Like it's kind of a unicorn person that can do both the technical stuff and the marketing stuff. And whenever that happens, usually generates success for whatever business that they're trying to do.
It is a good point because, I mean, if you look at the mountain of things that we've just said, figuring out all your time and money and, make sure you understand business admin and, maybe you should dip your toe in, maybe you shouldn't, maybe you should quit cold turkey, maybe you shouldn't. I mean, and there's other ways to do this too, like, go part-time employment and then work part-time on your business. So it's like, there's absolutely going to be time during the day for you to work on your business because you only work half the day at a regular job, things like that. Maybe your job in particular, you want to sell a product, but you could do a bit of freelancing where you work as like a consultant or you do some service business for people. So maybe you sort of like bridge the gap, if you will, between the business versus you working as an employee. I'm kind of droning on, and that's exactly probably what's going to be going through your mind. And if you're alone, like Mike said, you have the co-founders, like if you're alone, not only is that daunting, but it's going to be very daunting for things that you're not good at. If you are a person that's extremely good technically and are not good socially, like, I mean, as you just said, Mike, with the whole, like, 90-10 split or other split in general, it's sort of like, I do agree with you. Like, there's a lot of soft skills at a job, but, if we talk more about the entrepreneur side, there's a lot of soft skills with the entrepreneur side. You have to smooth things over. You have to kind of understand the relationships with people. We've worked with some people for so many years that I basically just text them like I would a friend, where I'm not like, setting up like dinner plans with them or something. But like just today, it's like I was supposed to publish like 2 features for somebody and actually only published 1. I've worked so long with the person. I'm like, oh, haha, sorry, I actually, made a mistake and I'll just publish that second one for you. Sorry. And it was like, yeah, no worries, thumbs up. That was it. Whereas like a new client might be like, is this the kind of work that I expect? Or somebody who may be a bit more serious or a bit more intense might be like that, even if you do work with them for years. And so there's a lot of those people skills that you really have to deal with. And then also, I would say that with all that, there's like a mindset shift that has to be had. I mean, you may do everything right where you're like, I'm great with people, and maybe I have a co-founder that does the marketing or the technical, and, he does A, B, I do C, D, and we're great, right? And then all of a sudden it's like you work for a client and they ghost you. You have a great proposal and the company that you want to work for is like all on board, and then all of a sudden their market is hit by something and they start laying people off and then it collapses. What if you have spent a whole bunch of time learning a platform and then all of a sudden the platform or the app shuts down? And I feel like a lot of people will overplan and not realize that even though you've planned a bunch, which is great, there's still going to be issues. And so as someone who runs a business, you need to be quite resilient. because when you're in a team, you're insulated from that, where the brass effectively has to do it, right? The administrative team is the person that tells everybody, oh, shoot, we shouldn't have been using WordPress. We should have been using Webflow for this. Oh, shoot, we should have been using Webflow for this. We should have been using Wix Studio or something, right? It just doesn't matter. Like, they just keep switching website builders. The point of the matter is like, that's up to the admin team. And you're just kind of sitting there being like, okay, well, in the ticket, make sure you update that I'm supposed to use Webflow. You didn't have like a bunch of strategic thought in that. You weren't the one that got the message that, we need to change platforms due to some reason, budgeting or preference or whatever. You're not the person that's kind of like trying to fight off the brass to deal with it. It's a different mindset. It's a different, like, really resilience in your own thoughts.
I think like the resilience thing is so important to understand that I want to double down on it a little bit, where like pretty much any idea you come up with, you're almost guaranteed to have to pivot in some way. Now, it doesn't have to be like a full pivot. Like, your idea might be good, but maybe your execution needs to be pivoted. Maybe some sort of method, like one of the parts needs to be pivoted. You have to expect you to adapt to your client's needs, essentially. So if you have an app idea and you're like, okay, this is going to work for sure, and you give it to someone and they're like, we don't know what the heck this is or how to use it, you have to adapt to that situation and make it so that it does make sense, right? So your first like shot at whatever idea you have to assume that it's going to suck, in my opinion. You have to get it out there. You have to get it in people's hands. You have to get them to use it. And then you have to adapt to whatever they tell you and get it to the point where it's usable for the first, X amount of clients. And if you think about like large companies that have done this before, like if you think about Amazon, for instance, that was a bookstore. Like, they pivoted hard to all the different things that they found that their clients wanted. The clients are like, well, we don't just want books. Boom, pivot to everything, right? Netflix was a video rental service through, like, they literally sent you CDs in the mail. And the clients are like, well, we need a faster way to get this. Like, we don't want to wait for this to come. And then so they have to pivot. Now, these are grand examples on like bigger timescales, way bigger timescales, but it's like very clear examples of this. A lot of times it's going to be much quicker. Especially the first iteration is going to be much, much quicker. And then you're going to have to continually do this throughout the career of your product if you want it to succeed. You have to be able to be resilient, not just from the start, not like the first 10 days, not the first 30 days, but literally like years and years and years ago. Because if you stay stagnant, you will most likely fail because someone else will come and eat your lunch and do something better than you. So the resilience.
Well, look at Amazon's Fire Phone. Like, the Fire Phone is a prime example where you just talked about their huge pivot where they went from bookstore to department store. They were an established, effectively, online department store. And then they were like, well, people use cell phones. Let's try to make a smartphone. Think about all the planning and all the stuff that went into making the Fire Phone. Fire Phone comes out, it's like, oh, Jesus, so that wasn't good. And we walk away. If Amazon wasn't resilient, and if Amazon was like really emotional about it, Amazon could have shut down.
There's a lot of money invested in that. Billions.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like, you have to be okay with failure. You have to be okay with pivoting. You have to be okay with being wrong because you're wrong. Just period. Like, whatever assumptions you made, probably wrong in some way, shape, or form. And so you have to adapt to that. Resilience, not going to lie, like if you're someone that can't take criticism initially, you can't, it's hard for you to fail. That's going to be a blocker for you to be a business, like to make a business, because you're damn sure you're going to fail. Like, you are going to fail, and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, like, failure is going to be a part of what happens to you. And imposter syndrome is not going to like suddenly not be a part of your life. Like, if you felt imposter syndrome in your role as an employee, you're certainly going to feel imposter syndrome when you make a mistake, because you're like, oh my God, like, should I really be doing this? Or if you're making all the calls and you're like, wait a second, why am I making all the calls, and doing all the business admin and making the automations and making the systems I use for organization, like, why am I doing this? It's like, there's going to be imposter syndrome, whether you're an employee or an employer. You're going to need resilience to get past failures and also past the imposter syndrome. And I kind of want to conclude this episode a little bit by saying that, it kind of sounds like we're coming off as someone who's like rather intense a little bit. Like, I feel like a lot of the time on this show, but also others, it's very much like, everyone calm down, just start your business. It'll be great. It's like, I feel like we're trying to give a bit of a more realistic look at it, because Mike and I, we prepared to start this business when we were in college, living at home, no dependents, no rent, no nothing. And, we've since grown since then. Obviously it's been years. It's been, 8 to 10 years, whatever it's been. And we still make mistakes. I mean, just before this meeting, we were talking about some new content that we're talking about. We were talking about some potential new plans that we wanted to do. We were talking about, should we do this? Should we do that? How are the numbers? How are the statistics? And these are things that, we've made mistakes where we're like, this episode's going to do amazing, whatever episode it is. And we've literally just I don't know, 50 minutes ago, or however long this episode is, 40 minutes, we've literally just gone in and been like, oh my God, that episode did horrible. Like, that was a timely episode. It had a good title. We SEO'd it. It was great. Like, what the heck? But I'm still recording right now. I didn't go to Mike and say, Mike, last episode's done or didn't do so well. I'm sad. I'm upset. I'm an imposter in my own skin and I'm leaving. And I just want to say that, like, we're being kind of, I wouldn't say we're being rough. We're not being harsh. We're being a little bit rough. Like, we're being a little bit more like realistic, I guess you could say, where we're just trying to like put the impression upon you that the road to entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur is not this great thing where it's like, I have, the biggest office at the top of the skyscraper and I'm doing fantastic. That's just not the case. Like, it's going to be a rough road if you eat, and there's going to be some ups, some downs, some luck. But if you want to do it, it does have its benefits.
And the good news is that, like, back to like what we were talking about early in the episode, if you're talked out of doing it by this episode, that's good. That means that you weren't fully into it and you would have probably failed anyway. But if you're gun-ho, like, you listen to this episode, you're like, heck yeah, all that sucks, but I want to do it. I want to get through this. I want to go through the grind. And you're listening to this, and that's what the mind is saying. Then that's a good indicator for you to be like, okay, I think I can try this. Because, like, I just listened to Matt and Mike talk about the difficulties of entrepreneurship and how hard it is to break in. And I still want to do this. Like, I want to go through the mud. I want to, I want to get there. I want to crawl there and get out the other side and, be fail a couple times and maybe be successful in the end. And that's really important. Like,
I want to get out there and
be a failure. I just want to fail. I want to fail hard. Right? Like, I want that. That's what I want. But I mean, like, the reality is like, I just looked it up, right? The statistics, 90% of startups fail. 90%, right? In the landscape of like 5 to 10 years. So when I say you want to be a failure, like, yeah, you're probably going to fail to a certain degree. But if you can get through it and you can continue to pivot and continue to move through that mud, that's a good indicator that you might succeed. And so, like, again, if you listen to this and you're still motivated to get through it, just do it. Like, bear down, jump in, do it on the side, however you have, like I said, do the time planning, like time and money planning, and jump in, because this is for you. Like, this is the episode. This is the episode for you.
Well, and I'd like to hear from the audience. Like, if you guys think that, that this is good advice, bad advice, if you're thinking about, making the jump and you have some questions for us and how we did it, totally let us know, of course. And there's other episodes where I'm sure we've covered this as well. But absolutely, let us know what you think. But I think that I really wanted to kind of give like a realistic take on the transition. I didn't want to have like the classic, like, make sure your business plan is in order, because like that type of advice you can get just from doing some Googling. That type of advice you can get from a bank manager if you're going for a loan or things like that. Like, I wanted to give more of a, hey, this is what we've seen, this is what we've been seeing, and this is what we see on the daily. And, if this is the environment that you're going to be entering into, specifically with tech, obviously we're talking more from a technical perspective, from a developer's perspective. But if you're worried more about like, another completely different industry, and you're like, I don't think that like what Matt and Mike just said applies. Other industries might be totally different. There's no way for us to be an expert in every industry. But from a technical perspective, from a tech job, working online job, making or running a website or a web app, I think that this stuff does apply. But that's it. If you want to support episodes like this, remember we can do so at patreon.com/HTML, all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons, Tim from The Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se, Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server, and Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. I'd also like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLAllTheThings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.